You're listening to episode 23 of the official broadcast of Recovering from Religion.
In this episode, we cover a journey away from religion.
I interviewed John Follis, writer, director, and producer of the award-winning film Leaving God. When it comes to how someone finds their faith, with few exceptions, their parents believed in that, and that's what they told their kid to believe in. And usually, to go along with that, people are told that they better not ever question it or there'll be consequences. So, with few exceptions, most people are told which God they're going to believe in. Now, when it comes to how people leave their faith, there's a much wider variety of stories there. It could be anything. It could take a matter of days or almost a lifetime. And there seems to be an infinite amount of reasons why people leave their faith. And that's what we're going to discuss on this episode.
Yeah, Scott interviewed John Follis, and he created this really impressive film. It won awards. I mean, it is definitely worth watching. And we wanted to not spoil the entire film for you. We want it to be worth, you guys checking it out. But we wanted to share some of his story with our podcast listeners and encourage you to watch the film via this interview.
Yeah, and like you said, we didn't want to give away the main plot. So we just discussed why he chose to tell his story this way, a little bit about the film, and a little bit about him. And you can view this film by going to vimeo.com, that's Vimeo.com, or YouTube, and search for Leaving God, John Follis.
We hope you enjoy the show.
John Follis is the writer, director, and producer of the award-winning film Leaving God. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Scott. Glad to be a guest.
Now, you were raised Catholic. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about your Catholic upbringing?
Yeah, I was brought up probably like most Catholics, at least during that time period. I grew up in the early 60s and went to catechism whenever Catholics started catechism back then. I'm guessing around 7 years old. I'm not sure exactly. But my parents, like good Catholic parents, stuck me in catechism. I did that for, I guess, a year or two to get my communion. And once I did that, then they stuck me in confirmation classes, which I did for another year or so. And then after grammar school, I went to a parochial junior high for about 3 years, which I talk about in the film, as you may recall.
Right.
Not the fondest of memories.
Right. So you said that you were at least in part motivated to do research because of a 2016 report entitled Exodus. It has to do with why Americans are leaving the religion. So what was significant about that report that motivated you to do this film?
So when I started researching on clergy who no longer believed, it directed me to that research, which totally blew my mind. I think it's a fascinating idea to explore that there are many now, and a growing number of clergy people who are in this space where they're struggling with the fact that they don't believe what they used to believe when they chose that as a profession. And they're all at various stages on the continuum of, I guess you call it atheism or truth-seeking, whatever you want to call it. Some of them have actually come out, like Mike Ouse, who was the first one that I featured in the film. But that was just a fascinating thing for me to learn about. And that was kind of a tipping point for me to give myself the permission to attempt to make this narrative documentary on Leaving God, because that was a more interesting story than my own. And I thought that I could probably weave my story into the film, but I had to kind of wrap my story in between the idea of this bigger idea or a more interesting idea of ministers and pastors who no longer believe in God.
And those numbers are rising all the time as we observe so much. So in New York City, you found a church. Can you tell us a little bit about that church and the community that you found in it?
Yeah, I stumbled on the church. It's called the Marble Collegiate Church. It's where Norman Vincent Peale used to be the minister for many years. He wrote The Power of Positive Thinking. I stumbled on the church via the broadcasts that they used to do that went in various markets around the country, including Chicago. And this was back when Norman Vincent Peale was still the minister. And I was just really blown away by his sermons, and very positive. You'd listen to their sermons and you'd feel better. So when I moved to New York, and knowing that the Marble Collegiate Church was in New York, it was one of the first things that I decided to do, to check out the church. It was just a great place. I still think it's a great place for many people.
I see. Okay. So you met your wife in the church, and because of that, you thought it was a blessing from God. But like a lot of marriages, especially the first one, it wasn't really much of a blessing in the end. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about that?
In retrospect, we should not have gotten married. She had given me an ultimatum. In retrospect, it was not a good way to kind of decide to get married. And I think some of the reasons I was hesitating to get married kind of played out once we were married.
And later on, you were...
But it's unbelievable. I have to say, what happened next is really, really unbelievable.
Probably the most entertaining part of the film. I think my favorite part. Yeah, you got to watch this film, people. Anyway, so later on, you were approached by the church to launch an advertising campaign, and the budget was 6 figures. I won't give you the exact amount, but it was
right.
6 figures for just not very long at all. Tell us what it was like to sell God.
It was super cool. That was about 21 years that I had been in the ad business, and I had been involved in selling all kinds of products and services, but never a product that did everything and was free. So the idea of, it wasn't really selling God. I mean, they wanted me to help promote the church and defer to my talents and experience on figuring the best way to do that. So when I thought about it and kind of stepped back and tried to ask myself how to do that, I thought that one of the best ways to try to promote the church was, in essence, try to sell God. Because like I said, what better than to sell a product that does everything, is available 24/7, and it's free.
Yeah, and it worked. I mean, you really got younger people into the church, right?
They told me that it was very effective. In fact, they had been spending a lot of money on radio, and they were doing some other forms of advertising in multiple media. And they said that they asked people who came to the church to fill out a little card that said, "How did you find out about it?" And the various options were, via the radio, a friend told me, I saw something in the newspaper, all the various media options that the church was using. And they said that the ads that were running on the subway, which is one of the media that we had determined would be a good fit for the church ads, were these posters on subway cars, that beat all the other options combined when they added up all the feedback that they got from those cards, that subway ads were more effective than all the other channels combined. So that was one way they were able to determine the effectiveness.
I see. Okay, so you continued this campaign for over a decade, but then something happened that really made you start to question religion. Can you tell us about that?
So I don't want to give too much away, but I talk about that in the film.
Can you compare your life back when you believed in God and now?
Instead of spending my time listening to ministers, I spend my time listening to scientists and Bill Maher and people who I think just make a lot more sense. In one way, there's a sense of loss to conclude there's not some supernatural power that can just make miracles happen when he feels like it. On the other hand, I feel like I'm living a life that's more truthful. And for me, and this is again just for me, I can't say what anyone else should be doing. I want to live a life that's based on reality. Because if I have a more reality-based perspective of the world, I think I can make decisions accordingly. And I think whenever you live a life and you make your decision based on reality and all the facts, you're just going to have a better outcome.
I see. So there's people listening to this episode because they're having doubts or questions about their faith. What advice would you give to those listeners?
Keep asking questions. Don't accept, just have faith, which to me means take our word for it. Don't take anyone's word for it. Do your homework. Ask questions. Don't assume just because someone tells you something that it's true. Live your life based on reality. And if you determine that God is your reality, that's fine. That's your decision. But never stop asking questions would be my advice.
I think that's pretty good advice. So can you tell the listeners where they can find your film and where they can find you on the internet?
Sure. You can find me on the internet just by Googling my name. What you'll probably see is a lot of my advertising related stuff, since that's what most of my professional career has been about. My name is John Follis, Follis. I'm sure it'll be on your podcast somewhere. If you want to check out the film, it's on YouTube and Vimeo. I would suggest you go to Vimeo, Vimeo, and you should be able to find it just by typing in the keyword leaving God.
John, thanks for taking the time to talk with me today. I really appreciate it.
Scott, it's been great being a guest. Thanks so much.